The statue of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood tall and proud in Havenwood's town square, a bronze testament to a man who had dedicated his life to serving the community. But to Silas Blackwood, it was an eyesore, a symbol of everything he despised. Silas, a man hardened by years of simmering resentment and fueled by a steady diet of online conspiracy theories and right-wing talk radio, saw the statue not as a monument to progress, but as a monument to his own perceived grievances. He'd lived in Havenwood his entire life, a life he felt had been unfairly overshadowed by the town's celebration of the Reverend's legacy. He wasn't overtly racist, not in the way he'd openly use slurs or engage in violence. His prejudice was more insidious, a low hum of discontent that vibrated beneath the surface of his everyday life. It manifested as subtle slights, dismissive comments, and a deep-seated belief that the town and the country were being unfairly manipulated by forces beyond his control. The Reverend's statue, a constant reminder of a black man's success in a predominantly white town, was the perfect target for his simmering anger. His campaign began subtly. At first, it was just grumbling amongst his circle of friends, mostly older, white men who shared his disillusionment with modern society. They met at the Rusty Mug, a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town, where they nursed their beers and complained about changing times. Silas, with his booming voice and persuasive manner, was the natural leader. He spun tales of the Reverend's supposed misdeeds, stories gleaned from dubious online sources and whispered rumors, twisting facts and exaggerating incidents until they painted a picture of a man far removed from the revered figure celebrated by the town. "They're trying to rewrite history," he'd bellow, his voice thick with indignation. "This statue, it's a symbol of their lies, their agenda." He'd point to the statue, a glint of anger in his eyes. "It's an insult to hardworking folks like us." His friends, initially hesitant, were gradually swayed by his passionate pronouncements. They were men who felt left behind, ignored, and forgotten in a world that seemed to be moving too fast for them. Silas gave them a cause, a target for their frustration. He offered them a sense of purpose, a feeling of belonging. Soon, the grumbling at the Rusty Mug evolved into organized action. Silas, with the help of his newfound allies, created a Facebook page called Havenwood First, which quickly attracted a small but fervent following. They posted inflammatory articles and distorted images, spreading misinformation and stoking fear. They organized a petition to remove the statue, collecting signatures from those who shared their sentiments, and those who were simply too apathetic to resist. The petition, accompanied by a series of increasingly aggressive posts on the Havenwood First Facebook page, began to garner attention from local news outlets. A small article appeared in the Havenwood Gazette, a neutral recounting of the controversy. But Silas knew that wasn't enough. He needed a bigger stage, a louder voice. He began to organize rallies, small gatherings at first, but gradually growing in size and intensity. He used a megaphone to address the crowd, his words laced with anger and resentment. He spoke of lost jobs, of rising taxes, of a community being overrun by outsiders. He subtly tied these grievances to the presence of the Reverend statue, weaving a narrative that painted the statue as a symbol of everything that was wrong with Havenwood. The rallies, though small compared to the town's overall population, were enough to create a rift within the community. Those who supported the statue organized counter-protests, leading to tense standoffs in the town square. Havenwood, once a picture of peaceful tranquility, was now sharply divided. Silas Blackwood, the unlikely leader of this discord, watched with a grim satisfaction as the seeds of his discontent blossomed into a full-blown conflict. He had found his voice, and Havenwood was listening, whether it wanted to or not. The Havenwood Gazette's initial, relatively neutral article about Silas Blackwood's campaign to remove the Reverend Dr. King statue had been a mere spark. Now, that spark had become a wildfire, fueled by social media and the insatiable appetite of the 24-hour news cycle. Silas's Havenwood First Facebook page, initially a small gathering of disgruntled locals, exploded in popularity. The inflammatory posts, the distorted images, the carefully crafted narratives of victimhood. It all resonated with a segment of the population hungry for a scapegoat, a reason to explain their anxieties and frustrations. The algorithm, that unseen hand that dictates what we see and read online, amplified Silas's message. His posts were shared, liked, and commented on, reaching far beyond the confines of Havenwood. National news outlets, ever eager for a sensational story, picked up on the controversy. Cable news channels aired segments featuring Silas, his face contorted in righteous anger, his words carefully chosen to maximize impact and minimize nuance. He became a reluctant, yet undeniably effective, media darling. The local news coverage shifted from neutral reporting to a more sensationalized approach, driven by the increased viewership and online engagement. Headlines screamed about racial tensions in Havenwood, statue sparks bitter feud, and town divided over controversial monument. The constant barrage of media attention further polarized the community. Havenwood, once a town known for its quiet charm and neighborly spirit, was now a battleground. The town square, once a place of peaceful gathering, was now a site of tense standoffs between Silas's supporters and those who championed the Reverend's legacy. The two factions, once united by a shared sense of community, were now locked in a bitter struggle, their differences amplified by the relentless media coverage. Silas's supporters, emboldened by the media attention and the growing online following, became more vocal and aggressive. They organized larger rallies, their numbers swelling with people drawn in by the controversy and the promise of belonging to a movement. They vandalized property belonging to those who supported the statue, defacing buildings with hateful graffiti and spreading misinformation through anonymous flyers. On the other side, those who defended the Reverend's legacy organized their own counter-protests. They held vigils, created online campaigns to counter Silas's narrative, and organized peaceful demonstrations in support of the statue. They created their own Facebook page, Keep King in Havenwood, which, while gaining traction, struggled to match the reach and intensity of Silas's campaign. The sheer volume of hateful rhetoric and misinformation coming from Silas's side often drowned out their voices. The division wasn't just online. It seeped into the fabric of daily life. Friendships fractured, families were torn apart, and neighbors who had once shared friendly conversations now avoided each other, their faces etched with suspicion and distrust. The local businesses, caught in the crossfire, suffered as customers stayed away, fearing the escalating tensions. The school board meetings became battlegrounds, with heated debates erupting over the curriculum and the way the Reverend's legacy was being taught. Even the town council meetings were disrupted by shouting matches and angry confrontations. Havenwood, once a peaceful haven, was now a town consumed by division and conflict, a testament to the power of misinformation and the ease with which a community could be torn apart. Silas Blackwood, watching it all unfold, felt a complex mix of satisfaction and unease. He had achieved his goal of bringing attention to his cause, but the scale of the division he had created was beginning to unsettle him, even as he continued to stoke the flames. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy in Havenwood extended far beyond the bronze statue that now stood at the center of a bitter town feud. He hadn't just been a pastor. He had been the heart and soul of the community for over 3 decades. His influence permeated every aspect of Havenwood life, from the schools and hospitals to the local soup kitchen and the annual town fair. He was a man who embodied compassion, resilience, and unwavering faith. Born and raised in a small southern town, the Reverend had arrived in Havenwood in the early 1960s, a time of significant social and political upheaval. He had quickly become a beacon of hope and unity, bringing together people from all walks of life, regardless of race or background. His sermons weren't just about theological concepts. They were powerful calls for justice, equality, and love. He spoke out against segregation and discrimination, not with anger or bitterness, but with a quiet dignity and unwavering conviction that inspired those around him. He established the Havenwood Community Center, a place where people from all backgrounds could come together to share meals, learn new skills, and build relationships. He organized community events, bringing together people who might otherwise have remained strangers. He visited the sick in the hospital, offering comfort and spiritual guidance. He helped those in need, regardless of their circumstances, offering a helping hand and a listening ear. His work extended beyond the walls of the church. He played a crucial role in desegregating the local schools, working tirelessly with community leaders and activists to ensure that all children, regardless of their race, had equal access to education. He helped establish a scholarship fund to support underprivileged students, ensuring that they had the opportunity to pursue their dreams. He wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, to speak truth to power, and to fight for what he believed was right. He did so not with violence or hatred, but with the powerful weapons of love, compassion, and unwavering faith. He believed in the inherent goodness of people, and he worked tirelessly to build bridges between those who were divided. His impact on Havenwood was profound and lasting. He had mentored countless young people, guiding them towards lives of purpose and service. He had inspired countless acts of kindness and compassion, demonstrating the transformative power of love and forgiveness. He had helped build a community that was stronger, more resilient, and more unified than it had ever been before. The stories of his kindness and generosity were woven into the very fabric of Havenwood. There were stories of him rescuing families from burning buildings, providing shelter to the homeless, and offering comfort to those who were grieving. These were not just anecdotes. They were testaments to the man he was, a man who dedicated his life to serving others. His legacy was not just a statue in the town square. It was the spirit of compassion and community that he had instilled in the hearts of those who knew him. It was a legacy that Silas Blackwood, in his anger and ignorance, seemed determined to erase. But the true legacy of Reverend Dr. King was far too deeply ingrained in the heart of Havenwood to be so easily forgotten. The simmering tension in Havenwood finally reached a boiling point. Silas Blackwood, emboldened by the success of his online campaign and the media attention it had garnered, decided it was time to escalate his efforts. He called a meeting at the Rusty Mug, his usual gathering place, to plan a major protest demanding the removal of the Reverend Dr. King statue. The bar was packed, filled with a mix of familiar faces and new recruits, all united by their shared resentment and a desire for change. Silas, standing on a makeshift podium fashioned from a stack of beer crates, addressed the crowd with a fiery speech. He painted a picture of a town overrun by liberal elites, a town where their voices were ignored and their concerns dismissed. He spoke of lost jobs, rising taxes, and the erosion of traditional values, subtly linking these grievances to the presence of the statue. This statue, he thundered, his voice echoing through the crowded bar, is a symbol of everything that's wrong with Havenwood. It's a reminder of our lost heritage, of our forgotten values. We're not going to stand by and let them rewrite history. The crowd roared its approval, their anger and frustration palpable. They were a diverse group, united not by race or background, but by a shared sense of grievance and a desire to fight back against what they perceived as an injustice. There were elderly couples who felt forgotten, young men who felt disillusioned, and women who felt their voices were unheard. Silas gave them a voice, a platform, and a sense of belonging. The meeting was highly organized. Silas, surprisingly adept at logistics, delegated tasks, assigning roles and responsibilities to his supporters. They planned the route of the march, organized transportation, and prepared signs and banners. They even created a detailed social media strategy to maximize the impact of their protest. The goal was not just to remove the statue. It was to make a statement, to send a message to the town, the state, and the nation. News of Silas's planned protest quickly spread through Havenwood, sparking a wave of counter-organization. Those who supported the Reverend's legacy, initially disorganized and overwhelmed by the intensity of Silas's campaign, rallied together. They held their own meetings, organizing counter-protests and planning ways to defend the statue. Their approach was vastly different from Silas's. They focused on peaceful resistance, emphasizing the Reverend's legacy of love, compassion, and unity. They organized a volunteer group to protect the statue, planning to form a human barricade around it on the day of the protest. They also created a social media campaign to counter Silas's narrative, highlighting the Reverend's positive contributions to the community and refuting the misinformation spread by Silas and his supporters. The counter-protest was not just about defending the statue. It was about defending the values that the Reverend had embodied, values of tolerance, inclusivity, and understanding. It was a testament to the resilience of the community, a demonstration of their determination to resist the forces of hate and division. As the day of the protest approached, the tension in Havenwood reached a fever pitch. The town was clearly divided, the lines drawn sharply between those who sought to erase the Reverend's legacy and those who were determined to protect it. The peaceful coexistence that had once defined Havenwood was shattered, replaced by a palpable sense of fear and anticipation. The town hall meeting was held in the Havenwood Community Center, ironically the very place founded by the Reverend Dr. King decades ago. The air crackled with tension as hundreds of residents filled the room, their faces reflecting a mixture of anger, fear, and anticipation. The meeting was intended to be a forum for discussion, a chance for both sides to present their arguments and find common ground. But from the outset, it was clear that this would be no ordinary debate. Silas Blackwood, his face flushed with anger, was the first to speak. He stood at the podium, his voice booming through the room, his words laced with indignation and resentment. He repeated the same tired arguments he had used in his online posts and rallies, accusing the town council of ignoring the concerns of the majority and pandering to a small group of activists. He painted a picture of a town divided, a town where progress was being sacrificed at the altar of political correctness. He spoke of lost jobs, of rising taxes, of a community being overrun by outsiders. He subtly linked these grievances to the presence of the Reverend statue, weaving a narrative that painted the statue as a symbol of everything that was wrong with Havenwood. He spoke with a practiced ease, his words carefully chosen to appeal to the emotions of his audience, to stoke their fears and anxieties. His performance was met with a mixture of cheers and boos. His supporters, many of whom were present in the audience, applauded his words, while those who supported the statue hissed and jeered. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, the air heavy with the scent of impending conflict. Following Silas, Eleanor Vance, a retired schoolteacher and a lifelong resident of Havenwood, stepped up to the podium. Eleanor had known the Reverend personally, and she spoke with a quiet dignity and unwavering conviction. She didn't try to match Silas's fiery rhetoric. Instead, she spoke from the heart, sharing personal anecdotes and memories of the Reverend's kindness and generosity. She spoke of the Reverend's tireless work in the community, his unwavering commitment to social justice, and his profound impact on the lives of countless individuals. She spoke of the community center, the scholarship fund, and the countless acts of kindness and compassion that the Reverend had performed. She spoke not just of his accomplishments, but of the man himself, his warmth, his empathy, and his unwavering faith. Her words were simple, yet powerful. They resonated with those who had known the Reverend, those who had benefited from his work, and those who simply recognized the truth in her words. Her speech was a stark contrast to Silas's inflammatory rhetoric, a calm voice of reason in a sea of anger and division. The ensuing debate was intense and emotional. Silas and Eleanor clashed repeatedly, their words sharp and pointed, their emotions raw and exposed. Silas accused Eleanor of being part of a liberal conspiracy, while Eleanor challenged Silas to confront his own prejudices and acknowledge the truth of the Reverend's legacy. The audience was captivated, their attention glued to the two speakers as they traded barbs, their arguments punctuated by cheers, boos, and occasional outbursts of anger. The debate highlighted the deep divisions within Havenwood, the chasm that had opened up between those who clung to the past and those who embraced the future. It was a battle not just over a statue, but over the very soul of the community, a battle that would determine the future of Havenwood and the legacy of the Reverend Dr. King. The meeting ended without a resolution, leaving the future of the statue hanging in the balance, and the future of Havenwood uncertain. The heated debate between Silas Blackwood and Eleanor Vance raged on, the tension in the Havenwood Community Center palpable. The air was thick with anger, accusations, and the weight of unspoken resentments. Silas, fueled by his own bitterness and a carefully constructed narrative of victimhood, continued to press his case, his voice booming through the room. Eleanor, though visibly shaken by his attacks, held her ground, calmly and resolutely defending the Reverend's legacy. Then, a frail, elderly woman, barely visible in the back of the room, rose slowly to her feet. Her name was Martha Jenkins, and she had lived in Havenwood her entire life. She had known the Reverend since he first arrived in town, and she had witnessed firsthand the profound impact he had on the community. She had been hesitant to speak, fearing the hostility that had come to define Havenwood in recent weeks, but she could no longer remain silent. A hush fell over the room as Martha began to speak, her voice weak but clear. She spoke not of grand pronouncements or political ideologies, but of a specific event, a moment frozen in time that had forever shaped her life and the lives of many others. She spoke of a fire, a devastating house fire that had engulfed her neighbor's home many years ago. It was a cold winter night, Martha began, her voice trembling slightly. The house was engulfed in flames, and everyone thought my neighbor, old Mr. Blackwood, was trapped inside. He was an elderly man, frail and weak. No one dared to go near the burning building. The flames were too intense, the risk too great. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Silas, his face frozen in a mask of disbelief, stared at Martha, his eyes widening in recognition. He knew exactly who she was talking about, his grandfather. He had never known the full story of that night, only that his grandfather had miraculously survived a devastating fire. But then, Martha continued, her voice gaining strength. The Reverend arrived. He didn't hesitate. He ran into the burning building, ignoring the flames and the smoke, and he carried my neighbor, old Mr. Blackwood, out to safety. He saved his life. He risked his own life to save another. A stunned silence filled the room. The intensity of the debate seemed to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of awe and disbelief. Silas's carefully constructed narrative, the foundation of his campaign, crumbled before his very eyes. He had spent weeks attacking the Reverend, spreading misinformation and fueling hatred, unaware of the profound debt he owed the very man he sought to dishonor. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Silas's face was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and shame. He had never known this story, this act of selfless bravery performed by the man he had so vehemently condemned. His grandfather had never spoken of it, perhaps out of shame or embarrassment, or perhaps simply because he had never fully understood the magnitude of the Reverend's sacrifice. The weight of his actions crashed down upon Silas, the hypocrisy of his campaign stark and undeniable. He had spent weeks fueling hatred and division, all while unknowingly benefiting from an act of extraordinary kindness and selflessness performed by the very man he was trying to destroy. The truth, revealed in a simple, unassuming voice, had shattered his carefully constructed world, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. The town hall meeting, which had begun as a battleground, had unexpectedly become a crucible, forging a moment of profound revelation and the potential for unexpected transformation. The town hall meeting dissolved into a chaotic aftermath, the heated debate abruptly silenced by Martha Jenkins's revelation. Silas Blackwood, however, remained rooted to the spot, his mind reeling from the unexpected truth. The carefully constructed edifice of his resentment, his anger, his carefully curated narrative of victimhood, it all crumbled under the weight of Martha's simple, yet devastatingly powerful words. He had spent weeks fueling a campaign of hate, driven by misinformation and a deep-seated bitterness, only to discover that the man he was attacking had selflessly saved his own grandfather from a fiery death. The hypocrisy was crushing, the weight of his actions pressing down on him with an unbearable intensity. He slipped out of the community center unnoticed, the noise and chaos of the meeting fading into a dull roar as he walked away. The night air felt cold and harsh against his skin, a stark contrast to the burning shame that consumed him. He walked aimlessly, his mind racing, trying to process the overwhelming information. He replayed Martha's words in his head, each syllable a hammer blow against the wall of his carefully constructed beliefs. He couldn't shake the image of the Reverend, a man he had demonized, risking his life to save his grandfather. The man he had portrayed as a symbol of oppression had, in reality, been a beacon of hope and selflessness. The realization was both humbling and terrifying. It forced him to confront the ugly truth of his own prejudices, the ignorance that had fueled his actions, and the deep-seated resentment that had poisoned his perspective. Driven by a desperate need for clarity, Silas returned home, his mind consumed by the need to verify Martha's story. He spent the rest of the night poring over old newspaper articles, searching for any mention of the fire. He scoured online archives, seeking any record of the incident. He contacted his family members, hesitantly probing for information about his grandfather's past. The information he uncovered confirmed Martha's account in chilling detail. He found a newspaper clipping from the time, a grainy black and white photograph depicting the burning house, and a heroic figure carrying an elderly man to safety. The caption identified the hero as the Reverend Dr. King. He found records from the fire department, confirming the incident and the Reverend's involvement. He even found a faded photograph of his grandfather, his face etched with gratitude, standing next to the Reverend, both men visibly shaken but alive. The evidence was irrefutable. The man he had vilified, the man he had sought to erase from the town's history, had been a selfless hero, a man who had risked his own life to save his grandfather. The weight of this realization was almost unbearable. The anger and resentment that had fueled his campaign now felt hollow, pathetic, and utterly misplaced. He had been blinded by his own prejudices, his own ignorance, and his own deep-seated insecurities. He had allowed his bitterness to consume him, blinding him to the truth. Now, confronted with that truth, he felt a profound sense of shame and regret. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he had to make amends. The weight of his actions pressed down on Silas with crushing force. The revelation of the Reverend's heroic act had shattered his carefully constructed worldview, exposing the ugliness of his own prejudices and the hypocrisy of his campaign. He wasn't just angry, he was ashamed. The anger he had directed at the Reverend now turned inward, a searing self-condemnation that left him feeling hollow and lost. Sleep evaded him. He tossed and turned, haunted by images of the burning house, his grandfather's frail form, and the Reverend's courageous act. He replayed the town hall meeting in his mind, his own words echoing back at him, laced with the venom of his ignorance and the bitterness of his resentment. He had been so sure of himself, so convinced of his righteousness, so blinded by his own prejudices that he had failed to see the truth. The truth was harsh and unforgiving. He had allowed his own fears and insecurities to fuel his hatred, transforming him into someone he barely recognized. He had become a purveyor of misinformation, a spreader of lies, a man who had actively sought to erase the legacy of a selfless hero. The man he had sought to condemn had, in reality, saved his own family. The irony was unbearable. He spent his days in a state of profound introspection, wrestling with the implications of his actions. He questioned everything he had believed, everything he had said, everything he had done. The carefully constructed narrative he had built around his grievances now felt flimsy and hollow, a pathetic attempt to justify his own prejudices. He realized that his anger towards the statue wasn't about the statue itself. It was about something much deeper, something far more insidious. It was about his own fear of change, his own discomfort with a world that was becoming increasingly diverse and complex. It was about his own insecurities, his own sense of displacement in a society that seemed to be leaving him behind. He had used the Reverend as a scapegoat, a convenient target for his own frustrations. He had allowed himself to be manipulated by misinformation and fear-mongering, transforming his anxieties into a weapon of hatred. Now, confronted with the truth, he felt a profound sense of guilt and remorse. The hypocrisy of his actions was particularly painful. He had presented himself as a defender of traditional values, a champion of the common man, yet he had actively sought to erase the legacy of a man who embodied those very values. He had claimed to be fighting for the soul of Havenwood, yet he had allowed his own prejudices to poison the community he claimed to love. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. He had been wrong. Terribly, irrevocably wrong. He had allowed his own biases to cloud his judgment, blinding him to the truth and leading him down a path of hatred and division. He had to find a way to make amends, to repair the damage he had caused, and to confront the ugly truth of his own prejudices. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but he knew he had to start somewhere. He had to begin by acknowledging his mistakes, accepting responsibility for his actions, and seeking forgiveness for the harm he had caused. The weight of his prejudice was immense, but he was determined to carry it, to learn from it, and to emerge from this crisis a changed man. The weight of his guilt spurred Silas into action. He knew he couldn't simply bury his shame and move on. He had to confront the consequences of his actions, to seek forgiveness from those he had wronged. He had to begin with the Reverend's family. Finding their contact information proved surprisingly difficult. The Reverend had been a private man, and his family had largely kept to themselves after his passing. Silas had to rely on old church directories and online searches, piecing together information from scattered sources. Finally, he located the contact information for the Reverend's daughter, Sarah King, a woman he knew only through photographs and brief mentions in local news articles. He hesitated for days, his hand hovering over the phone, his heart pounding in his chest. He drafted and redrafted his message countless times, agonizing over the right words to convey his remorse. He knew there was no guarantee of forgiveness, no assurance that Sarah would even be willing to listen. But he had to try. Finally, summoning every ounce of courage he could muster, he dialed Sarah's number. His voice trembled as he introduced himself, his words hesitant and filled with apprehension. He explained his reasons for calling, his voice thick with emotion as he recounted the events of the town hall meeting and the subsequent revelation about his grandfather's rescue. To his surprise, Sarah listened patiently. She didn't interrupt, didn't express anger or condemnation. She simply listened, her voice calm and measured. When he finished, there was a long silence, broken only by the sound of Sarah's gentle breathing. Then, she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I've heard about your campaign, Mr. Blackwood," she said. "I've read the things you've said online. It's been painful, to say the least. But I also know my father. He was a man of faith, a man of forgiveness. He wouldn't want us to hold on to anger or resentment." Silas felt a wave of relief wash over him. Her words were a lifeline, a beacon of hope in the darkness of his guilt. He continued to apologize, expressing his profound remorse for his actions and his heartfelt regret for the pain he had caused. He confessed his ignorance, his prejudices, and the deep-seated insecurities that had fueled his campaign. He spoke of his newfound understanding of the Reverend's legacy, of the man's selfless acts of kindness and compassion. Sarah listened patiently, her voice offering a quiet solace amidst Silas's turmoil. She didn't offer immediate forgiveness, nor did she demand retribution. Instead, she suggested a meeting, a chance for Silas to apologize in person, to express his remorse face-to-face. She invited him to her home, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about her compassion and willingness to offer him a chance at redemption. The meeting was emotionally charged. Silas, overwhelmed by a mixture of guilt and hope, poured out his heart to Sarah and her family. He recounted his grandfather's story, his own journey of self-discovery, and his deep regret for his actions. He spoke of his newfound understanding of the Reverend's legacy, his commitment to service, and his unwavering faith. Sarah and her family listened with quiet dignity, their expressions a mixture of sadness, understanding, and a hint of hope. They didn't offer easy forgiveness, but they did offer compassion, a willingness to listen, and a chance for Silas to begin the long and difficult process of making amends. The meeting ended not with a definitive resolution, but with a fragile sense of reconciliation, a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness of Silas's past actions. The path ahead remained uncertain, but Silas left Sarah's home with a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to atone for his mistakes and to honor the legacy of the man he had once sought to destroy. The town hall meeting was called for a different purpose than the last one. This time, the air was thick not with anger and division, but with a palpable sense of anticipation and uncertainty. Silas Blackwood stood before the same crowd he had addressed weeks earlier, but this time, his demeanor was markedly different. Gone was the fiery rhetoric, the indignant pronouncements, the carefully constructed narrative of victimhood. In its place was a quiet humility, a profound sense of remorse, and a genuine desire for forgiveness. He began his speech with a simple admission: "I was wrong." The words hung in the air, stark and undeniable. There were murmurs in the audience, a mixture of surprise, skepticism, and cautious hope. Silas continued, his voice trembling slightly at first, but gaining strength as he spoke. He recounted the events that had led him to launch his campaign, his own anxieties and frustrations, the misinformation he had consumed, and the prejudices he had allowed to cloud his judgment. He spoke of his ignorance, his anger, and the deep-seated resentment that had poisoned his perspective. He didn't try to justify his actions or minimize their impact. He simply acknowledged his mistakes, taking full responsibility for the harm he had caused. Then, he shared the story of his grandfather's rescue, the revelation that had shattered his carefully constructed worldview. He spoke of Martha Jenkins's testimony, the discovery of the newspaper clippings and the fire department records, and the profound impact this information had had on him. He described the weight of his guilt, the crushing realization of his hypocrisy, and the shame he felt for his actions. He spoke of his meeting with Sarah King and her family, of their compassion and willingness to offer him a chance at redemption. He described the emotional weight of apologizing to them, the relief of being heard, and the hope that their forgiveness might offer him a path towards healing. He didn't shy away from the ugliness of his prejudices, acknowledging the role his own biases had played in shaping his actions. He spoke of the need for self-reflection, the importance of confronting one's own biases, and the necessity of seeking understanding and empathy. He acknowledged the pain he had caused, the divisions he had created, and the damage he had done to the community he had claimed to love. His apology wasn't a performance. It was a genuine expression of remorse, a heartfelt plea for forgiveness. His words were simple, yet powerful, resonating with the audience in a way that his previous pronouncements never had. He spoke not only of his own failings, but also of the importance of unity, understanding, and the need to learn from the past. The silence that followed his speech was profound, a stark contrast to the heated debates that had characterized previous town hall meetings. Then, slowly, tentatively, applause began to ripple through the room. It wasn't a thunderous ovation, but it was genuine, heartfelt, and deeply meaningful. It was a sign of forgiveness, a testament to the community's resilience, and a symbol of hope for the future. Silas, his eyes filled with tears, stood silently, his heart filled with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of purpose. He had taken the first step on a long and difficult journey, but he knew that with the community's support, he could begin to rebuild his life and atone for his mistakes. The future of Havenwood, once uncertain, now held the promise of reconciliation and healing. Silas Blackwood's public apology marked a turning point in Havenwood. The town, once sharply divided, began a slow, tentative process of healing and reconciliation. The anger and resentment that had fueled the conflict didn't vanish overnight, but the intensity lessened, replaced by a cautious hope and a willingness to engage in dialogue. Silas, surprisingly, played a key role in this process. His transformation was remarkable. The man who had once been a symbol of division now became an unlikely agent of unity. He actively sought out those he had wronged, offering sincere apologies and working to repair the damage he had caused. He reached out to members of the community who had supported his campaign, engaging them in conversations, listening to their concerns, and helping them understand the error of their ways. He didn't shy away from the responsibility for his actions. He acknowledged his mistakes openly and honestly, never attempting to minimize his role in the conflict. His willingness to take ownership of his actions, coupled with his genuine remorse, disarmed many of his former supporters, leading them to question their own prejudices and biases. He began to use his newfound influence to promote understanding and empathy. He collaborated with Eleanor Vance and other community leaders to organize workshops and discussions on the importance of tolerance, inclusivity, and the dangers of misinformation. He used his social media platform, once a tool for division, to spread messages of hope and reconciliation. He worked closely with the Keep King and Havenwood group, actively participating in their efforts to celebrate the Reverend's legacy. He helped organize community events, bringing together people from all walks of life, fostering dialogue and building bridges between those who had once been locked in bitter conflict. He volunteered at the Havenwood Community Center, the very institution he had once sought to undermine, working alongside those who had opposed him. His efforts weren't always met with immediate acceptance. Some remained skeptical, harboring lingering resentment and mistrust. Others were slow to forgive, their wounds too deep to heal quickly. But Silas persevered, his commitment to reconciliation unwavering. He understood that healing takes time, that forgiveness is a process, not a single event. He focused on small acts of kindness, small gestures of goodwill, that gradually chipped away at the walls of division. He helped organize a fundraising drive to repair the damage caused by vandalism, bringing together people from both sides of the conflict to work towards a common goal. He participated in community cleanup projects, working alongside those who had once been his adversaries. Slowly, tentatively, Havenwood began to heal. The town square, once a site of tense standoffs, became a place of peaceful gathering once more. The conversations that had once been filled with anger and suspicion now flowed more freely, filled with a newfound sense of understanding and empathy. Silas's transformation was a catalyst for this change, a testament to the power of self-reflection, genuine remorse, and a commitment to making amends. The community, once fractured and divided, was slowly but surely coming back together, united not by a shared ideology, but by a shared experience, a shared journey towards healing and reconciliation. The legacy of the Reverend Dr. King, once threatened, was now being reaffirmed, not just through a bronze statue, but through the renewed spirit of unity and compassion that was slowly returning to the heart of Havenwood. The reconciliation in Havenwood wasn't just about forgetting the past. It was about learning from it and building a better future. Silas Blackwood, having found redemption through his sincere apologies and tireless efforts at reconciliation, felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wanted to honor the Reverend Dr. King's legacy in a meaningful and lasting way, a way that would solidify the town's renewed unity and serve as a testament to the power of forgiveness and transformation. He proposed the creation of the Reverend Dr. King Community Center, a facility dedicated to promoting education, community engagement, and social justice. The idea resonated deeply with the community, a symbol of hope and a testament to the town's commitment to healing and progress. Silas, drawing on his newfound leadership skills and his connections within the community, took the lead in organizing the project. He worked tirelessly, bringing together people from all walks of life, transcending the divisions that had once plagued Havenwood. He collaborated with local businesses, securing donations and sponsorships. He worked with architects and builders, overseeing the design and construction of the new community center. He even reached out to Sarah King and her family, seeking their input and guidance. The design of the center was carefully considered, reflecting the Reverend's legacy of compassion, service, and unity. It included classrooms for educational programs, a large meeting hall for community events, a computer lab for digital literacy training, and a kitchen for preparing meals for those in need. The building itself was designed to be environmentally friendly, reflecting the Reverend's commitment to sustainability and responsible stewardship. The fundraising campaign was remarkably successful, exceeding expectations and demonstrating the community's unwavering support for the project. People from all backgrounds contributed, their donations a testament to their shared commitment to healing and progress. Even those who had once supported Silas's campaign contributed generously, recognizing the transformative power of the project and the opportunity it presented for reconciliation. The grand opening of the Reverend Dr. King Community Center was a momentous occasion, a celebration of Havenwood's renewed unity and a testament to the power of forgiveness and transformation. The event was attended by hundreds of people, representing all segments of the community. Sarah King, visibly moved by the occasion, delivered a heartfelt speech, thanking the community for their support and honoring her father's legacy. Silas, standing alongside Sarah, delivered a brief speech of his own, acknowledging his past mistakes and expressing his profound gratitude for the opportunity to contribute to the project. He spoke of the importance of learning from the past, of embracing forgiveness, and of working together to build a better future. His words were met with thunderous applause, a testament to his transformation and the community's acceptance of his redemption. The Reverend Dr. King Community Center became a symbol of Havenwood's rebirth, a testament to the town's resilience and its commitment to progress. It served as a constant reminder of the Reverend's legacy, not just as a historical figure, but as a symbol of hope, compassion, and the transformative power of forgiveness. Silas Blackwood, once a symbol of division and hatred, had become a symbol of reconciliation and unity, his redemption complete, his legacy inextricably linked to the very community he had once sought to divide. Havenwood, once fractured and divided, was now a stronger, more unified community, its future brighter than ever before.